Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, the live show number 358. I'm your host, Lauren Gray, and thank you for the privilege of your time this morning. If you're watching us in our time zone of 11:30 Eastern U.S., if you're watching us in another time zone, which we are notorious for, thank you, everyone. I'm looking over to my left because that is where we're simulcasting on all of our platforms, Facebook, several pages, LinkedIn, one page, mine, look for Lauren Gray on that one. Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch for those that get their media through their gaming console. And of course, as always, on our TV station. That is right, our TV station, TV channel, Hospitality Channel to be exact. And that you can find on your Roku, Apple TV, Google TV, and Amazon TV. Fire Sticks, things like that. Plus, also as an app, if you want to watch us or listen to us on any of the program that we do on there, you can do it on Apple iOS or Android Google Play as well. In the store. That just look for the Hospitality Channel. With that, let's get started. So our topic is going to be a bit of a controversial one, and it is purely related to marketing. But first, we have to go through the controversial part. The topic today is that's a great transient rate, but can the guest really afford it? We are at that time of year where summer demand is at its peak. We have seen persistently in the news all the things that travelers are faced against, including ourselves if we were traveling as well, with the airlines having limited pilots, prices for fuel, for airlines being astronomical, which is elevating their prices. There's rent-a-car prices and inventory availability, and the fact that some inventory just doesn't exist. It sounds back to the Seinfeld show for those old enough to remember it, where he went to get to the rent-a-car council and had a reservation for a car that they didn't have, and there was a wonderful shtick about that. But all these things are out done, and then our own with the hotel yield, the hotel rates. Fortunately, in comparison to last summer, it looks like we are trying to have our amenities available for people that are coming to our resorts and our destination hotels. Where unlike last summer, where we didn't have the amenities available, whether it was to again lack of staffing and so forth or not, but these are all the price comparisons, just not to go off on tangents because we've discussed that on shows before, that are facing travelers, inventory availabilities and so forth. Now, some things like international travelers no longer having to be required to have vaccinations coming into the U.S., and for also us returning citizens to the U.S. being tested and proven to be negative for COVID being relaxed. Of course, numbers are going to go up, which they are. We are, as a society, dealing with the adjustments to the fact that COVID exists in our society. And so because of that, just the risk factors that individuals have rather than the government mandates that require masks and so forth. So those are the things on that side. Then added to the additional things for those that not those for flying and so forth. If they're driving, gas is at a historical high everywhere. And the cost of just about everything, goods, because due to inflation, very large inflation at this point, interest rates are going up. Salaries and incomes, even though they had been elevated due to COVID and the need to hire people, and we finally get the higher wages, isn't matching the pace of inflation and spending. We're at an all-time high when it comes to spending. So those are all the things we see in the news. Great. We're hospitality. We're hoteliers. What does that do directly to us that is actionable? Okay. So we are coming into summer as an industry with looking at our shops like, oh boy, because here comes all that latent pent up demand that we saw the tsunami of last summer for those people so eager to get out and take advantage of the low rates and prices that they were first able to grab and so forth, and the first chance to travel, that they were willing to pay whatever it took to take a trip. There was a lot of people that didn't do that, myself included, during that time. There was still too much uncertainty with the pandemic and safety and so forth that just wasn't needing to have that itch scratched. This summer, however, people like myself and those that waited from not doing it last summer are now into that boat of, yes, I do want to take a vacation. Yes, I do want to get away. Yes, I do want to spend time with family and all the things that may have been depriving myself of these past 2+ years. And so this summer is reflecting that demand. And going back to what I just mentioned of all the challenges that travelers have, there is still the I'm going to do it in spite of. It's called revenge travel. It's an actual coined phrase that is happening right now for our time of year travel demand. It's called revenge travel. I am going to travel in spite of everything. I'm going to travel in spite of what fears I have. I'm going to travel in spite of what people say I shouldn't pay for, so forth. They are going to spend. And what's happening is a lot of people are spending beyond their capability of affording the travel. They will spend themselves into debt simply to be able to have travel. That's how ardent the travel demand is right now. Positive for us, right? As hoteliers, restaurateurs, those people are going to show up no matter what we say is a price. And we are doing just that. We are elevating our prices uh, to accommodate the fact that we can ask for those prices. Now, our system is based on yieldability. And the fact that there's so much demand that if we escalate the rate, we, as a historical revenue management function, when you see the demand coming in, okay, and there's a term called unconstrained demand, if we had a room for everybody kind of thing. Um, but knowing that there isn't and there's a limited inventory, you understand the unconstrained demand level, balance that to the reality of inventory, and you determine your demand cycle. And from that, you determine your rate program. As a revenue management, as an organization that is out for profitability, that is our goal. We are running a business to be profitable. We need to make money in excess of what it costs us to provide the service so that we can provide value for those people that risk the money to run the business. That is the model we all operate with. The problem is that there is no cap end to that discussion. There are some bumpers, like for instance, what's called back of the door rate, which is the rate we can't exceed because by law, this rate is the maximum rate we can ask for that room in particular. That is a guideline legally to say this we can't go past this. That is really always meant to be a factor for gouging, where people can't charge you well in excess of the value of the product simply for the exploitation of the demand of that product. And we see this. I live in South Florida. There's anti-gouging laws that when hurricanes come through and it destroys the infrastructure, even albeit temporarily. Um, Bottles of water that used to cost 25 cents at Costco now are $25 at a local store. And the guideline is take a picture of that and share it so that the government can eventually pursue that business for having gouged you. Now, if you take that mentality, then we are in jeopardy or troubled waters because we're in effect doing the same pricing strategy at this point. We are literally charging as much as we can for the product because of the demand that is prevalent. And it's just well in excess of it. And people's willingness to pay for it isn't the fact that they're capable of paying for it. We've had a show number 354, that we talked about point of sale of loans, micro loans that have high interest rates that cover your travel expenses. It's a function that's being actually placed in services that are being provided. When I go to high tech 2 weeks from now, I'm looking to see some of these vendors having booths at the technology conference for hospitality, touting their wares about how they're providing a method of payment service that you or is in the e-com funnel for our hotels that says, hey, you've chosen all these dates and things. This is how much it's going to cost and everything else like this. You can pay with your credit card, pay with your debit card, or you can maybe do a deferred loan program. Here it is, click. And of course, you have to, as we talked about in the show, go through a two-stage process. There's a soft and a hard ping on your credit, which of course affects your points on the hard ping, to validate your authenticity of being able to pay the loan back. It also dictates the type of percentage, but the base percentage is incredibly high. And given the fact that our interest rates have been by the Fed just recently raised up 0.75, huge jump in the Fed rate just yesterday. It means it even augments the fact that they can even charge higher interest rates because the baseline is being moved up. The cost of money has gone up. So their money is what they're lending you. So the cost of borrowing it is going up. We're seeing that for our mortgages. We're seeing it for everything. So we're going to see higher credit card rates. We're going to see higher microloan rates and so forth. And that expense has to be paid. So we're forcing people into this modality of how am I going to afford this cash flow issue for my travel demand interest, this revenge travel that I have to do. I must do a travel. Okay, we've painted a lot of pictures to this. We've described the predications of all this. We tried the current environment that we're in with this. Our model as an industry, as a business, is like similar to most other people. We can charge a price that is by market interest and demand. Going as far back as when you want to talk about Cabbage Patch dolls, and there was such a demand for them that the resale market, Beanie Babies, And this goes back years, and that was the predication to what we deal with every day. We see in the news, and we tisk this, that we see businesses that are exploitively charging exorbitant prices because they can, because the demand is there that outstrips the supply, which increases prices. These are basic economic models in our society. Our whole sense of capitalism is based on this process. Find a product that is sellable, make it available to the point that you can charge a price that can continue to possibly go up, because the demand is there. You generate the demand through marketing, and through that demand generation, you develop sales, and those sales generate profit. Profit generates success. The reason why you went through this process. And there's a lot of benefits to this program, as many in our society know. There's a lot of detriments in our program. We look at gas prices. We blame our government for the fact that the prices are high. Yet some people are looking and going, well, why is the petrol companies, gas companies making such a profit margin? Oh, and they tout, well, all of our plants are in capacity, which is double speak for the plants we have open are at capacity, but we closed a lot of plants. And then some of the plants they closed because, well, we're upgrading them for the environmental concerns that are being forced upon us. They're doing it earlier than they needed to, and they're using it as an excuse of why they can yield lower supply to have higher prices. Why is the Saudis and everybody else that has oil resources not flowing out higher supply to diminish monies? Because they're making a lot of money off the fact if they keep a little throttle faucet on this, they can charge a higher price for what they're producing. It generates profit. We can't condemn the very system that we uh, tout as being our success. That's where we are. But as a hotel industry, we have one thing that is about us, and that is the heart of the servant, hospitality. What are we doing to the benefit of the guests? Because everything that I've just described in revenue yield management and hospitality is not to the benefit of the guest. None of that is to the benefit of the guest. That is to the benefit of the business owner. That is to the benefit of the person that has the monetary investment in providing the service. By no means am I slighting those people to want to not make profit for their business, especially given the fact of the economic turmoil they've had in these past few years, where they had to suffer loss and had to invest money to maintain the business because there wasn't a profit margin to be. There wasn't even a amount of revenue to cover costs during that period. But I can lay claim to having concerns over the demand to make up for all those losses, plus then some, by the exploitation of prices that are existing right now. So back to my topic discussion, now that I've spent almost 15 minutes, 12 minutes, discussing the woes of our society. Um, we have, at this time, a reality between what the willingness of our guests is wanting to pay versus the ability for them to pay. Now, in our marketing world and in our revenue management world for hospitality, we segment our audiences according to the source of what they represent. We fundamentally change it between transient and group. For those in group, that is because they are as a organization coming to us, collectively negotiating rates and inventory availability based on the number of rooms that they are going to provide. Well, that doesn't translate to a transient business, to a transient traveler, which is only talking about themselves and their travel needs and demands. We, of course, have fragments to both of those, several, to be honest with you, as we try to categorize and identify the sources of business type based on both of those. But that's the primary segmentation for us. Transient, we have group. We're going to sketch group for just a second and move towards the transient side. In transient, we have several variations. The corporate transient traveler, the traveler that travels for business but organizes their own travel, is a segment of that. We love those because the company, usually as price sensitive as they would like to be, has a functional need to have that transaction occur because of their business requirement. They have to send somebody to your location for whatever reason that they're in the business for. And for that reason, they have to do it at the dates and times that they need to do the business on. And so they're less price sensitive towards that because they just need that date for them person to be there. That hotel room, for example, has to be booked because that's the day that that person has to be in for the business demands that that company has. Transient travelers have the flexibility of trying to decide when they're available, vacations and or travel opportunities, what have you, and what works best for them. They try to plan it so that they have the opportunity when they do. And yes, there are constraints as to the demand of transient travel, but for the most part, they have some variations where, well, let's not arrive that day because it's really a lot more than the next day. So they have some of that variation capability, but not a lot. But they often try to have those things into it. So we have, just for segments of conversation, let's talk about the pure transient traveler. No other segmentations at this moment, just the pure transient traveler. The person, as we discussed earlier, that has the pent up travel demand, the revenge travel mentality for this summer. Let's break it down into things that we do know. Statistically, transient travelers take 2 trips per year. We know that one of those trips is holiday related. Usually, Christmas is number one, Thanksgiving is number two. Then there is a Mother's Day third, closely followed by a July 4th and or Easter. Is those variations of how the descending order of prioritizations. That's Western culture. There are variations to that by all stretches and every imagination. Those are just the benchmarkers we're going to talk about today. And everybody has their own priorities to that. The second vacation they take has a longer duration. It is the larger perceived vacation in the sense of time consumption for it. And it is usually centric to the summertime based on the fact that you're now including family travel because of not having to be in school and the constraints associated with children being taken out of school for things like that. And the fact that it's a seasonal value of basically good weather in all areas that people are interested in going, whether it's in contrast to what they live in, meaning people from up north travel to the south because it's all beachy and fun and tropical and so forth, or vice versa, where people in the south, because it's so hot, want to go to some place that's more temperate. Either which way, we always find that we want more than what we have at the time, which explains why Colorado has the largest scuba diving club and Florida has the largest skiing club, just to give you a sense of that. So with this, you have summer demand as being pretty much the nexus for most of that second travel time that most people have, and for the longest durability, which inherently means that their budget for their summer travel is the larger between the two choices of vacations they have. Remember, we're dealing in averages. Everybody can say, well, I take more than 2 trips, or I don't take it around a holiday, or I take do this. Granted, this is an averaging of information that we're looking at. Oh, I should turn this around. Logo's on the other side. Ta-da. Anyways, so let's break it down from our perspective of a traveler. For our consideration of travel, we are obviously choosing our destination of interest. Let's just say we've gotten past that discovery phase and we have an idea of where we want to go. Now it comes down to the function logistics of what it's going to take for us to get there. First choice is the modality of travel. Is it flight or is it drive? Let's just pick drive for now. Now we can look at it and say, well, flights are there. Uh, we'll handle both in just a second. So let's say it's drive. Well, now we have gas considerations. So we have to figure out what route are we going to take and how far is it really going to be based on what we can afford for gas. We have to determine how much gas we're going to be needing for the trip, overall miles per gallon of the car, what the average gas cost is en route, okay, to determine what our budget capability is to pay for the gas. That has gone up substantially, 40 some odd percent on average for everyone. We have the fact that we are on the road for whatever duration of travel we're doing, and there is a need to eat. So there's cost associated with that. And we have variations everywhere from fast food all the way up to sit down dining. Okay. And they all have their price points as to per person costs per meal period. Then we have accommodations. That's us in that conversation. How much is it going to cost for me to stay where I need to stay, either in transient to there or as while I'm there, what I'm going to be staying for? And there's variations to that we know already between hotels and VRBOs and so forth. VRBOs are a little less likely in the transitory process of getting to a place because most VRBOs and Airbnbs and so forth are looking for longer duration usage. They don't want the one night stuff. So they're less likely to be in this market segmentation choice unless we've decided that as a travel process that we're going to spend several days in one location before going to the final destination place. Whatever. Variations exist. And then we have all of the entertainment expenses. What's it going to cost for us while we're there? What we're going to do? Are we going to a park, like a Disney or Six Flags or something? Are we going to go to a national park? Are we going to do entertainment things? Are we looking at venues and musics or whatever? There's costs associated with our entertainment while there, entries and admissions and so forth, museums, whatever it is that we're going for the purpose of the travel. So these are all the segments of costs that a traveler are facing. Let's break down we're still talking at 50,000 view here. We're just talking like you hear in the news. Well, people's gas prices are going for the travelers. What does that actually mean? What does it actually mean to say from a traveler's perspective, um, I have a 40% increase in gas costs, or from a hotel's perspective, I have a 20% increase in cost. Let's just be conservative, say 50% in hotel expenses going up. Airlines having gone up almost 30%. Actually, they're a little over 30%, but let's just say less than 30%. What does it actually mean to a traveler? So we know that these considerations exist for travel. All these are components of travel. We need to identify the realities of what demographics are we talking about in comparison to what our hotel provides. We've talked many times on the show about creating personas and people that we identify in generic terms based on the information we know about their lifestyles, their family configurations, their average mean incomes, their geographic sources that they're traveling from, the things that they're traveling for. These are all the things that we're coming into a part of a persona marketing. We understand these facets so that we can identify those things and correspondingly create advertisement and marketing communication to them so that we can let them know the information that is most relevant to them for us to be under consideration of their travel plans. That's the purpose of all that. It also helps us to identify who we're talking about that actually is going to be able to make it to us. And that comes to overall cost and value of what they have to spend. We already know revenge travel is out there, so we already know they're probably going to spend past their financial means. But let's look at the terms of financial means. Okay, on average, on average, the average U.S. family will spend just slightly less than 10% of their gross income for their annual travel. Okay, it's actually less than that, but I'm making it a nice round number for our conversations today. So if 10,000 or to be 10% of their income is towards these two vacation travelings that they do and whatever fragments they do of that, okay, then knowing that there's a weighted value to the summer travel, let's just take 6/10 of that percent. Okay, so 6% of their gross income will be spent on their summer travel vacations this year. Okay, so if you're making 100,000 as a family, that's $6,000 you're going to be spending for your summer travel. Sounds like a lot, really. We'll see. Obviously, if you spend less, incrementally it's less. But let's just start with round numbers to make sense. So we're going to say that an family income of 100,000, they spend $6,000. So how good is that for me as a marketer? What does that do for me? Okay, they're going to spend 6,000. Cool, money that they can spend with me. You're a piece of a puzzle, not the puzzle. They have all these other things they have to pay before they get to you, in addition to while they're with you. So what are you offering? I'm offering pretty good rates, 20% up. So where do you find the information that influences these people? How do you find how they have to break down their costs? Some fun tools, and they're going to be in the show notes. Let's just do a general overview of one first. There's a real neat one called Travel Math Trip Calculator. Let me put the link into our chat while we're here. The Travel Math Calculator is really neat in the sense that it will help you figure out real-time costs for where you plan on going from where you're at. It'll figure out what the gas mileage of your vehicle is because you're going to input in the model and the year and all the other stuff that's going to ask you. And it'll gather from the database of knowing about that vehicle what the average gas mileage is. You should already know that. And it'll calculate based on what it knows is the average mean gas prices for you to know what a one-way trip was going to cost you if you just strictly went from point A to point B. Okay, what the average estimated gas value cost would be, and of course the cost of the value of the round trip. That doesn't include any ancillary driving you're doing. It just means to get there and to come back, this is what average gas prices are going to be. You, of course, as a consumer, knowing where you're coming from, okay, can look at what the cost of the hotels where you're going to are, and you can calculate out based on your duration of your travel time there or your time there, what you might be spending in hotel costs. We as a marketer don't have that information because we don't know exactly where you're traveling from. We know most of it, but not all of it, to know what you're considering and in the sense of where you're coming from to where you're coming to us and what our market value is compared to what it's going to cost you to get there. Because you're juggling your gas prices, your food prices, what you want to spend while you're there, and your accommodation prices. So you're juggling all these things to figure out how all they fit into your budget of $6,000. Okay. So other tools that are interestingly useful Gas Buddy has a really neat thermal map for the United States. Let me give you that link real quick. Um, this link will help you as a marketer determine the gas prices, not only in your area, which is kind of easy for you to do already on the app, but also in the gas prices in the places and the distances between the places that you're marketing to know what the potential gas prices are for somebody between where they're coming from to get to you. So you can estimate roughly where their gas, how much gas is going to take for them to get there. Just an average consumptions, average miles per gallon, average, just to give you a stick in the sand, a benchmark that says this is about what it is. It can be less, it can be more. This is about where it is. To give you a reference for perspective of contribution of cost to get somebody here in a drive market. We can talk about fly market in just a little bit. Drive market. Okay. So Gas Buddy has a really neat thermal map to show you where the elevated gas prices are compared. Because remember, when they say the average national gas price is X, you can use that number. But the reality is there's places like California and Indiana and New York and places where it is much higher for their local considerations than other places. And then there's other places that are potentially lower. Well, depending upon where you are, that makes a difference as to how much gas prices impact the margin of cost that a guest is facing in comparison to what you're charging for hotel rooms. So that's where you can get the gas prices in this. There is average food prices. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics with the government has. Let me get that link for you. A really neat tool for food costs, the average food cost based on the category of what they eat between fast food and fine dining or just casual, sit down dining and so forth. We put that into our little chat links as well. That you get an idea of how much it costs per person, per day, per meal period. Okay. And that gives you a sense of how much people are spending in the process of their travel and also for the duration that they're there with you if you're not offering them value perspective that you have for food and beverage, which you're not going to get 100% capture. You have to math that out as to the percentage of capture you're getting and so forth. But you get a sense of what it's going to cost in the sense of their overall budget, which we've defined just for generalities of being $6,000 for a $100,000 family income. So we've covered gas, we've covered food, we've covered your accommodations. Okay. Now we have entertainment. Now you might know more specifically about this because you know your market best as to what entertainment venues cost in your area. Now you can go through the heavy lifting of that and say, well, the museums are this per person per day. The park is this per person per day. But if you're in someplace like Orlando, there's a Pandora's box of stuff to do. And that's a lot of prices and so forth. So again, I refer to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics that talk about average cost. There's also a really neat one. Florida does one actually. Visit Florida is really neat. They have a calculator as well, just for Florida, if you're in Florida. Okay. That has a cost per person based on what they're going to be doing. If they're in the Orlando market, if they're in other markets, what the average cost of entertainment expenses are per day, per person. Why we keep doing all this? Because as a marketer, you need to understand what you have as rate opportunity. The point of our discussion today, the nexus of us today, is sure, you can keep escalating your transient rate, which is to the pure benefit of your business. But what is the real ability of your guests to be able to pay that? Now, one relief valve, as we pointed out, whether we like it or not, is the alternative deferred payment programs that are being made available. Or the guest simply goes deeper into debt by throwing it onto a credit card that has an interest rate that's also going up. We're not here to converse over the morality of that, except for one point. We're in the hospitality industry. We're out to provide the service of our hospitality to our guests. Yes, it's for profit, but it's not out of exploitation that we do that. And that's the key element to this is I have been, based on the nature of my business, I've been on a tremendous amount of revenue management calls for a variety of clients, branded, unbranded, independent, resort, destination driven. All these things have different perspectives in their revenue strategy. They also have one common thing: escalation of rate. They see the demand, they raise the rates. There is no question that comes into it. Is this an affordable option for our guests? It is an answer to the fact their willingness to pay, not their ability to. And in our world of business, as we're treating it like everybody else. Hey, as long as they're willing to come and I can charge more money, then that's what I'll do. I'm not sliding businesses for getting profit. Absolutely not. And I don't think that we're going to solve everybody else's greed in the profit yielding that they're doing for all the segments we're talking about. But I think there's an equitable value of relationship, lifetime value that we're abandoning because people's expectations when they're escalating their rates go up with that. And if we're not providing the escalated value of service from that, which we know we have labor issues for, and scalability of our product newness and all the other things that people go, really? I'm paying this much to be here? You've had those things. Okay. Then we have to understand where we balance ourselves into the focus of our guests. We talk about focusing on our guests. Our guests are first. Take care of our guests. Take care of our team and take care of our guests. We have these wonderful phrases, but do we live by them? Not in the circumstance of our revenue management. Our revenue management is, hey, we're here as a profit for business. And so because of that, if we can get more price for what we're doing, then that's what we're going to do at the degradation of our relationship building with our guests. And you can easily counter that statement by saying, well, our guests aren't 100% loyal. We know there's brand apathy. We know that there's a rate driven interest. We know that this is one time business. They're not going to come back. Sure, we can say all of those things, but we can also say, and coming to that, by having a great experience, they share it with others, and those others turn into our guests as well. Maybe even just one visit themselves as well, but it's still perpetual value. Lifetime value used to be a major calculation in our discussions. Now it's a minor punchline for a lot of what we do. We don't worry about lifetime value. We talk about acquisition at the moment. We talk about current yield. We don't talk about future value. We don't talk about unrealized gains. We talk about current gains. This sound unfamiliar? It isn't. It's in every conversation that we have. It's in every discussion about revenue yield. It's easy to be a rock star as a revenue manager when all you're doing is raising rates because you can. And as soon as you hit a yield where it doesn't go up after you've raised rates or you haven't got the rate that you asked for, then it's okay, we hit the ceiling, let's notch it down a little bit, but you don't really bring it down. You just hold it until you can eventually try to raise the rate again. This is not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's a thing. It's a way that we handle our business in as such that we are losing lifetime value because we figure, you know what, whoever we're irritating by what we're asking for in prices, and for whatever reason that they're not going to come back because they weren't totally satisfied for the price they paid for the value that they or the service that they got, there's somebody else that's going to come back in their place. I used to call that the Disney mentality. Don't worry, if you don't like the price, get out of line. There's somebody behind you that will pay it. Um, that's why they were always able to raise their rates because there was always somebody that was willing to pay whatever it cost to get there because it was so important for them to get there. Sound familiar? That's our summer income right now. That is literally our business cycle right now. If you don't like the price, go somewhere else. This is our price. We have that attitude. We have that attitude all over the place. Hey, you want me now? Great. It's going to cost you. And as much as we banish people that do that, we see in the news of the 25-cent bottle of water that got sold for $25. We are, in fact, an echo of that. We are doing the same thing. Now, I'm not saying that we give away the farm, we lower our prices and so forth. I'm saying that we make them mitigate according to what I just talked about in cost factors. Let's go back to our example. 100,000 income for a family, which by the way is pretty healthy given the average mean income of the US. But let's just keep the numbers round for this point. $100,000 family income, $6,000 towards this vacation for summer. Most times, most vacations are based on the vacation capability of the parents, if it's with children, or with just the couples with their vacation opportunities. It's usually 7 to 10 days. Okay. So, with the knowledge that we have of data, we know that there are certain rings of travel that people have based on affordability, based on their interest. The first ring is Drive Market Ring of a 200-mile range. And if you have any questions of that, go look at the statistics for the most popular or highest volume delivery gas stations in the US, and you will literally can strike a circle 200 miles apart from every one of them because people travel in those segments. Why do they travel in that segment? Think about this in your own car. You have a car that can go 350, 400 miles. Maybe you even have one that even goes farther. There's a point where after 2.5, 3 hours, you want to stretch your legs, or it's time for a meal period, whether you left in the morning after breakfast and now it's lunchtime. After lunchtime, maybe it's an afternoon break or coming up to dinner time. We, in spite of the ability to travel farther, We travel in savings based on the comfortability of our travel. Now you have road warriors, always, like I said, these are benchmarks, not hard and fast rules, that hop in a car and they got little containers to make sure they don't have to go to the bathroom, and they got sandwiches in a cooler, and they do 12, 14, 16 hours solid. The only time that they pull off to the side is to put more gas in the tank when they finally hit the max limit on mileage. Mm, okay. We don't take risks. We don't run the gas meter down to E and then start looking for a gas station. We start looking for a gas station at half tank. By a quarter tank, we're probably getting gas. So the mileage value of what your car can do is really based on your behavior, not on the capability of the vehicle. AKA 200-mile ranges. Think about 200 miles. Think about your speed on the interstate. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? This is data that drives the validation of what we already know as behavior. So we have rings. 200 miles, 2.5, 3 hours. Okay. That's a day trip. That's what we call traveling on a tank of gas. Okay. You've gone that far out. Maybe that's where as far as you wanted to go, and you want to spend a day or two while you're there to do this back. That can happen, but that's not your real summer vacation. Now, that may be what a person can afford, and that is now their staycation perspective. Okay. Nobody's going to pay to be at a hotel room, especially premium rates that we're charging for, in the very market that they live in. It would have to be quite a resort or quite a place that they would go to, that they get to have a pool that they don't have at home, get to be in a larger space that they don't have at home, or in the condo units or whatever that they live in or whatever. It has to be quite a contrast to their living environment to want to stay in the very town and pay the dollars that they have to spend to do that. Okay. Some examples that come to mind is if you live in Orlando and rather than go from your home to the park, you really just want to be in the hotel in the park. Get up, get on the little tram off into the park early in the morning, not have to worry about getting there. It's reality, but it isn't the mainstay. Okay. So now, keeping with the drive market, you have another range. Okay. You had your 3 hour travel, but they somebody's trying to get somewhere. That means they're going to take the day to travel there. Remember, we're dealing with 7 to 10 days. Let's take 10 days. Such nice round numbers. 10 days of travel. Okay. So they're going to take a day to get somewhere. Okay. That means that they might go 500 miles. Okay. Now, where is that range for you in your feeder markets? You take a big old circle on a map, digitally nowadays, and figure out how far 500 miles is. Well, it's nice as crow flies, but the reality is the way the drive flies. So you really literally, and Google Maps is really easy. Just open up Google Maps, click on your location, click, and then go over and right click it and hit measure. And then go to any place around you, city wise or municipality wise, and click it, and it'll tell you the distance to that place. Or just simply just ask for directions to every place you want to put another pin to. It'll give you a perspective of what ranges, circle of ranges you're looking at. This is my 200-mile range. This is my 500-mile range. Okay. Beyond 500 miles, you're talking about 2-day travel. Okay. People can push 1-day travel and get 500 miles. Unlikely, but if they're really bent on getting somewhere, okay, then it's a 1 full day travel. A lot of travel. That's a heavy day. That's morning till late night, full travel. Stopping for gas, grabbing some food if you didn't know to bring it with you. Got to get there. Okay. And if you're in that juxtaposition between A and C, and you're the B category of 500 miles from someplace, then that's the market you travel to for intern travel. You know it's going to be 1 night stay unless there's reason to stay in your market. Okay. And they're there for the 1 night going to someplace else. So you market both ends. If you're coming from, going to, then that's who you market to for your intern travel and demand for who you are. Okay. Unfortunately, that usually lands on dates that you have a lot of other people that are wanting to come to your market also wanting. So you have to create fences in your revenue management that you can't just stay Friday night. If you check in for Friday, you have to also have a second day, whether it be a Thursday or Saturday on your booking. You put fences on that. Okay. Close to arrival or close to departure, duration of stays, things like this to mitigate and balance out the demand cycle. Okay. Or you're just hungry for any business that for at the time, which we're not right now, but if you were, and just let the 1 day stay open. These are revenue strategy models. So you have this drive range. Well, if you calculate with the little tools I gave you from Gas Buddy and so forth, and you look at the models and vehicles of the cars, you can understand that they're probably dropping 70, $80 just to get to you in that first direction. Okay. Well, 200 miles, I'm sorry. 200 miles, you're probably talking about 45, $50. $50 to get to you. Okay. Round trip means it's $100, just so you know, because they're looking at their whole travel budget at this point. So it's $50 to get to you, and that's the 200-mile range. If it's 500 miles, it's going to be $100 plus to get to you. So that's a part of their budget niche that starts kicking in. Okay, that doesn't include any ancillary travel of what they do when they get to the destination. That's just to get to you. Okay, 500 miles one day, nonstop, just get there. Boom. That's $100 to get there, gas wise. Now they're going to go over and stay with you, and your average is $250. Okay, a night to stay with you. Again, everybody's high, low, no low, probably higher. Okay, so $250. So first day, first night for gas and accommodations, $350. Add food. Let's say they ate breakfast before they left and brought sandwiches with them for the afternoon. So they only had one meal period that day. Average cost is $23 per person, $50 for two, $100 ish for four. Let's just say two people, another $50. So now you're into $400 first day, haven't done a thing, just got there and what it took to get there, $400. Now they're going to stay. They have a duration of 7 to 10 days. Well, it already took one day to get there, so you're already knocking off 2 days. So you can just double that right off the bat and say for $800, it was a to from thing. That's enough. Gas prices go up. Now, of course, they can't cover their meal periods, so meals go up because where they got to fudge their breakfast, lunch, they don't get to do that on the return trip unless they go grocery shopping. Option, but let's just say. So that's gone up. So it went from $800 to probably right now $900. The to from. That's not including anything else. That's just to from. $900, just do to from. Given anything else about it, let's just round it to 1,000, just to think that there might be variations to that for no other reason. Now, if you offer free breakfast, that might notch it down a little bit. If you're offering discounts in your own food and beverage outlets, which unlikely you are because everybody's greedy for money right now, as we've already been hounding about, let's just say that in and abouts and around is about $1,000 to do a to from for two people to drive to 500 miles out to a destination, spend their first and last night there. Okay. So you're left with 8 days. Okay. Because remember, your last night's stay is the night before you leave. So 8 days. Okay. Now you have the entertainment expenses and the daily food costs. If it is $150 a day for two people to eat moderately, that is fast casual, which is just above fast food. Okay. The Chipotles of the world kind of stuff. $150 for two people for 8 days. What is it? $1,500. Okay. So now you're at $2,500 out of your 6,000 of estimated amounts of money for this. For the food part, you're still at $250 a night. That's not including taxes or whatever. Let's just say $250 for 8 nights. You're at $2,000. So you're already at $4,000 for just the accommodations, the food, and the to froms. Now you're talking about entertainment, things to do during the course of the day. If you're left with $2,000 for 8 days, okay, then you're looking at about $175 a day for entertainment. Now, that sounds like a lot, and it can be. So, what we've identified that if your hotel is $250 a night, and you're 500 miles away from the place, and you figure the food being on average of all the averages we're talking about, we're already 2/3 into the fictionalized budget amount that people are willing to spend. Okay, $4,000 up of this 1.5 week trip. Okay, drive market trip. Let's change some of the variables. Okay, any income less than 100,000, that turns into a larger number. Anything less, anything more when it comes to flying and traveling. Now, there is some interesting. Again, I'm going to refer to a really neat Bureau of Transportation and Statistics. This was a neat little chart, older because they only quantified on hard data. Fourth quarter 2021, which we know is way less than what we're spending right now, both for fees and also for inflation. Okay. And we can watch the news and this is free stuff. So please understand, I'm not giving you this is the greatest source to get it from. I'm giving you sources that don't cost you anything to get this data, and then you can extrapolate from it. Okay, I threw it into the chat notes. No, you're welcome. Anyway, sorry, I'm not looking at the comments I'm getting on the other channels. Um, and then they're talking about domestic US. This is always translatable to your own country and also other considerations that you have locally. Um, this is tell you average flights. Now you can find this in the news and just benchmark it from the news numbers that you find, or you can actually go to places like this, or you can go into places like Statistica that you pay to get better information on, and there's even better ones than that. Just Statistica's nice, a nice UI interface one, but there's even harder data places to go, but are much more expensive. You got to warrant the data usage to pay the expense for this. But you can go and get some free. These are just to create benchmarks to understand the relative values of some of these things. But the flights are on average are $400 a head. Okay, so you add that, and then you want to go over and understand what it's going to cost for Uber estimates. Well, and this goes to a little bit of tangent discussion we have. So Uber and Lyft and other places, AAA has some great tools, by the way, for determining travel and distances and costs and what have you, and gas prices and hotel prices and food prices. They have their own interface that you have to have a AAA membership for, which I do, but I'm not going to share those links because honestly, unless you have a AAA membership, you're not going to be able to have access to those data. I'm keeping the data links to the ones that anybody can go look at. Okay. But Uber and Lyft have their own calculators. You pick up where you want to be picked up, where you want to go to, and it'll give you the estimate of prices. What has been making the news, but not making the highlighted news, is that these prices have gone the frick up. Okay. And it's not surge pricing. For anybody familiar having used Uber and Lyft, is that they have what's called surge pricing. When higher demand hits a market, prices escalate corresponding to the demand. Sound familiar? Anyways, so you can go in, say you're on a concert venue and you're trying to get an Uber to leave. That price is astronomical because you're one of a whole mess of people looking for cars in that exact location doing the exact same thing. And Uber knows this and they can charge you more for it. Remember, our economy is based on this stuff, okay? And you can balk at it, but you end up paying it. Well, there's also another influence that's happened into the consumer side economy, with the Ubers and the Lyfts and the delivery services and everything else, is the venture capitalists and the angel investors and everybody else that threw money at these things who told the company it's okay to lose money right now, build your audience, degrade your competition so that they don't have the percentage of market that they had when we are entered, when we're the small fry and they're the big fry. Now we're the big fry because we took their business by undercutting them because we weren't worried about profits. We're worried about we'll pay the debt. We'll keep investing in you to build the audience that we need you to have. Well, them days are over. Now the investors want their return on this effort of all the costs that they incurred, all the risks that they took, all the losses they incurred. Okay. Now they want their profits. They want their money back. And so what used to be a $10 delivery order because it was being basically supplemented by these investors is now a $20 delivery order. Why? Because that's the real price. That's what it costs to put a person on a bicycle or a little car or something and pay them to bring it to you. That's the real cost. Sadly, it's not making it to the person that actually is doing the work. They're getting paid the same. Okay. But now it's being more realistic to their cost. Ubers do cost $50 where they used to cost 20. Lyft does cost $40 when it used to cost 20, 15. Okay. Because it's more closely in tune with this is the actual cost. And now we have to balance that to our margins and so forth to cover the cost and make the margins of profitability we're looking to make. Okay, the very thing that they were pointing at a taxi service and say, look at how expensive that thing is. Taxis were realigned; they were aligned to their costs, albeit they might have also had their issues. But in all honesty, they were more true to the real cost of what it takes to put somebody in a vehicle that you have to pay everything for, except for that one moment when the person needs to use it. It costs money. Well, now we, because they displaced all those other competitors, have to pay this. Go find something else that isn't an Uber and a Lyft. Yes, there are out there, but they may not be in the market you're in at the time. Uber and Lyft are the more universal means of getting those transportation choices that you have. They've provided all the free, the services, the platforms, the app, so they did the dedication to using them because of the familiarity, the comfort zone, really, not loyalty, their comfort zone for using them. Well, there's no discounts with this anymore. There's higher costs. So there was a wonderful article in USA Today and said the millennial free ride is over. The supplemented businesses, consumer driven as they may be, and others, those supplements are gone. This is a bare economy, and those investors need yield on their investment, and that's where they are. They're taking advantage of the fact that they are now the market leaders, and they can call these prices because anybody that can compete against them can't. So You can look at the fact that Uber costs come into play now if you're flying. Flying costs come into play because you're flying. Availability of inventory flying comes into cost. We've seen in the news the fact that airlines are short of pilots and they're actually taking pilots from smaller carriers, those little, you know, class B ancillary markets to class B ancillary markets, and saying, "Hey, you who fly the Embraers, yeah, we're going to throw you into a training program for the 737s now. We need you up here, not there." And next thing you know, there's nobody to fly the little plane anymore. And so that lift, that line doesn't happen. So instead of being able to get from Boise to whatever, okay, you now have to go through Atlanta or Los Angeles or San Francisco because the only way all these things now work have to be back to the centric hubs. Go to the big places where the big planes go, and then you have to figure your own way out to get to the smaller markets. That's the reality of our airline lift. Plus, also prices are going higher, and be lucky to go over and be able to book it because there's more demand than there is supply. So even though you may want to fly, even though you may be capable of paying to fly, there may not be a seat for you to fly in. This is the reality of our travel right now. And yet they still come because of that. Not because of it, but because they have this pent up revenge travel requirement that they have. And this is the time of year they normally travel. So with that, you have, I threw in the Uber estimate. Here, let me throw in the Uber estimate. This is a tool, again, free, that will allow you to calculate the cost of an Uber ride to and from. Why is this important to you as a marketer? Because as a marketer, you need to understand what the cost is to your guests to get to you. They flew into the airport that you're nearby. What's the average cost of them flying into your airport? Well, that's that link to the Transstats from the BTS.gov, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I would say labor statistics, not labor statistics. It is, hold on, it'll be great. Transportation statistics. God, get my acronyms all wrong. Anyways, you need to understand what the actual hard costs are of your guests to get to you because you're standing in line like everybody else with your hand out going, yeah, it's going to cost you more to stay with me. Okay. All in all said and done, let's just look at the realities that functionally it is in and about $1,000 a day for a guest to travel right now. And I'm being real broad brushed when I say that. Variations between travel costs for driving, travel costs for flying, and the ancillary costs associated with both, the averaging costs of what it takes, the increased costs in restaurants per day, per meal, per person. Um, and this isn't the same price for kids, please don't get me wrong, but there is a cost for kids. I mean, you need a room type that can accommodate kids or a second room to accommodate your kids. You have cost of food and dining for the kids. You have transportation that require flight tickets or flight tickets for kids. All of these things come into play. But on average, if you throw it onto one big grinder and put it out and make the sausage, it is in and about slightly less than 1,000 a day for a traveler. So what does that mean for the travel? Well, length of stay means something because now if it's $1,000 per person, if you add all of these different costs in, okay, then you know what they're facing when it comes to budget. Going back to our original persona marketing discussion, if it's about 1,000 a day for a person to travel, they have to have a certain level of income to afford that. And if they don't have the income level, then they have to have the willingness to travel, which we know is there, but they now have to take a loan for that. Well, there's a certain capability of their ability to qualify for the loan and pay for the loan. So there's still an income threshold that has to hit. Somebody making 35,000 a year, okay, poverty lines, remember those? Okay, cannot get the finance. And if they even were given the finance, the interest would be astronomical, unlikely for them to pay back. But they get their vacation in before they go bankrupt. Okay, to be able to get the monies to take even the basics of trip. So you as a marketer have to determine the realities of the costs that can be afforded by your demographics to your hotel, and then accordingly look at your rates and see, can I solicit that level of guests? And you can say, well, I'd much rather take the person that I can charge the higher rate for, and it's too bad if they can't afford it. You're okay, business world. That's what we're doing right now. The problem is, are you looking at some things like, is your length of stay year over year going down? Like some people go over and look at it like retailers do, where they just make smaller packages. Well, we can't go as long as we like to do, so we'll just spend less time there. So is your length of stay year over year going down? And you have to look at your year prior to COVID as well. You have to look at what's called average weighted mean, not just last year, but average weighted mean over the course of pre-COVID, COVID, and now. Is your ancillary revenue going down? Okay, we can get there, but we can't go to the spa, we can't do the golfing, we can't do the stuff. We just got the room. We'll have to figure ways to go to the grocery store, make sandwiches kind of thing. Is your ancillary revenue going down? Okay. And then the other is, are you seeing your short-term Smurf business? Like, okay, so Susie Q's having a wedding. We really can't go and stay at the hotel that she's at because it's pretty darn expensive, but we can certainly go to a lesser priced hotel somewhere in the vicinity of the wedding to be able to do this. Okay. You know, so is your Smurf business picking up, or are they washing out where the wedding has a block, but the block doesn't get filled? Are they beginning to wash out? These are indicators that you are not in a price point that is accommodating your demographics. Okay. I say, and this is where it goes to adding into your conversation unrealized revenue. Okay. What are we sacrificing by getting what we're getting now? I'll take the person at $400 ADR for the one night that they're willing to stay, but wonder if I brought it to 350 and got a 2 night stay out of them. How does that balance? Remember the whole ADR versus occupancy math that we always talk about that every hotelier knows from day one? Okay. How much do I charge versus how much it costs me to offer it, and how much inventory do I have to provide for it, and the cost of the inventory and all the other stuff, fixed costs, overhead costs, okay. Same conversation, same thing, same revenue management. But we're not talking about that right now in our revenue guidelines. It's more about let's raise the rate and see what happens. Oh, hey, nothing happened. Right, raise the rate again, see what happens. That's what we've been doing. Now let's look at what is the unrealized revenue that we have. Sure, we're running at 75, 80% for the rates we're asking for. Would it be possible, not just for the getting the higher occupancy? I'm not touting occupancy centric strategy in this process. I'm talking about lifetime value, unrealized gains. Okay. Yes, I got them to stay with me now, but because of what they didn't experience at the level that they paid for, they're unlikely, if even improbable, to stay with me again. There's no lifetime value to that relationship. However, if I mitigate my price to being a little bit more reasonable, and yes, it'll increase my actual cost workload, which by this point you're already balancing out with the occupancies that you have. That the cost factor is already covered because you have thresholds of cost. Remember, old school hotel math. Okay, so if I did this, but now the person might want to say, that was really wonderful. We really got a great price for that compared to everything else around. Let's go back there. They were really nice people and it was really worth the price. Because remember, perceived value, price value versus perceived service. If you lower your rate, the perception of value is improved. Okay. So maybe this is a value proposition that says, I'll get them back again, especially if I do my marketing right. Get the reviews that they say this was really neat, especially for what we paid, whatever. Okay. And then solicit continued conversation with them through proper marketing communication that we know we should be doing to keep them ready to come back again because we didn't abuse them the time that they were with us the first time. That unrealized gain, that lifetime value should come into our revenue management conversations right now. Our demographics as to thresholds of affordability should be in our revenue management discussions right now. These are the things that help our marketing strategy, that rather than just turn and burn what we have walking in our door each day, okay, to realizing that we'd like them to walk into the door again and bring their friends because of the experience that we gave them the first time they were with us. This is proper marketing. This is proper hospitality. We know that our hospitality industry is basically polaric. Okay. We have those that are in hospitality for the spirit of what hospitality is, the business itself, and then we have investors. They're out to yieldability and functionality and how much money can they make off of what they're doing. And none of what we just discussed at the tail end of our discussion is in their mindset. Theirs is completely about how far can we push the rate for the minimalist amount of cost for us to do it. That's their function. It's their business relationship of why they're owning a square box building that has little rooms in it. That's their purpose. But other people run hotels with, I have a beautiful location with places you can stay and I can have a wonderful experience shared with you because you came to stay with me. And yes, it costs you money. And yes, I want to make a profit off of you, but I want you to come back again. That's what we're dealing with. And we're not including it in our revenue conversations. We, as Tim Peters says in his podcast, as we look at the big clock on the wall, are out of time. We want to keep those always just to an hour. It's an impassioned plea to consider the possibilities of including these types of things in your dialogue, but most importantly, look at the tools to really define the costs that it takes for somebody to travel with you in the means and modality of their travel, the means and modality of their duration of stay with you, and the means and modality of what it costs for them to be in the market that you're in. Think of those in real numbers. I gave you the tools to look at things, to at least give you benchmark as to values of those things. So you have some sense of what it took for that person walking up to your front desk, what it took for them to be there, and for them to be spending the money that they're spending per day while they're there with you. My name is Lauren Gray. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week on show number 359. Till then, bye everybody. You know what I mean? And yet we all know teams work best when it's a shared relationship, where the best talented person at the circumstance of what's happening is the contributor that benefits the, that provides the most. And they may not be the next the next time the same person that provides the same level, because situations change. We don't operate like that.